The Lorthan Dominion was vast, a sprawling collection of star systems held together by fear and force. It prided itself on efficiency, discipline, and total dominance. Among its many worlds, one insignificant human colony barely registered, a speck of dust in the Empire's ledger. New Haven was a quiet place, a settlement carved out of the void by stubborn pioneers. Its people weren't warriors. They weren't insurgents. They were farmers, engineers, dreamers. They built homes, raised families, and lived in peace. Peace had no meaning to the Lorthans. The patrol ship descended over the settlement, a sleek black predator against the early morning sky. The enforcers inside, 6 heavily armed Lorthan soldiers, were bored. There was no real reason for the visit, only the standard routine of reminding the lesser races who ruled the galaxy. The humans would bow, nod, tremble a little if necessary. That was all. Sergeant Drelk, the squad leader, tapped his claws against his gauntlet as the ship settled onto the dusty ground. The ramp lowered with a hydraulic hiss. The heat of the twin suns bathed the armored figures as they stepped onto the main street. Humans. They watched from doorways, some standing still, others turning away as if hoping to disappear. A few children peeked out from behind crates, curiosity outweighing fear. Drelk sneered. Pitiful creatures. Weak, soft, naive. How had they ever made it off their own planet? A boy, no older than 10, stood in the open, holding a battered ball. Beside him, a girl, perhaps a year younger, clutched a stuffed toy against her chest. Unlike the adults, they didn't cower. They didn't bow. They simply stared. Drelk's amusement turned to irritation. "Move along," he barked, his voice guttural, synthesized through his helmet's translator. The boy didn't move. One of the soldiers shifted uneasily. "Sir, maybe we should." The ball bounced once against the ground, the child's small fingers having released it. It rolled toward the patrol, stopping near Drelk's boot. A simple thing. A child's toy. Drelk raised his rifle. The shot rang out, impossibly loud in the silence. The boy fell. A woman screamed. Somewhere, someone gasped. The little girl stumbled backward, confusion frozen on her face as she looked at her brother's still body. The stuffed toy slipped from her hands. A second shot. She crumpled next to him. For a moment, no one moved. No one breathed. Then panic exploded through the settlement. People ran. Doors slammed shut. Mothers clutched their children and fled. Somewhere, a man shouted something in the humans' crude language, but it didn't matter. Drelk lowered his rifle. "Let that be a lesson," he said, stepping over the small, lifeless forms. "Disrespect will not be tolerated." The squad boarded their ship, indifferent to the chaos they had sown. As they lifted off, smoke curled from the rooftops where they had fired warning shots. Another nameless day. Another nameless colony. They did not know what they had done. Rachel Rose stared at the transmission, unblinking. The image flickered, distorted by distance, but she saw enough. She saw the patrol. She saw her son, defiant. She saw her daughter's tiny fingers grasping at nothing. And she saw the soldiers pull the trigger. Her face remained still. Not a tremor. Not a flicker of emotion. But something deep inside, something dark, something old, began to stir. The past had been buried. She had buried it. Years had passed since she had left that life behind, since she had walked away from the shadows and the blood. She had sworn never to return. But there were some lines that could never be crossed. Her hands moved with calm precision as she shut down the transmission. The dim lights of her home seemed colder, sharper. She stood. A panel in the wall slid open at her touch. Inside, an unassuming black case. She lifted it, placed it on the table, and unlatched the seals. The lid opened with a quiet hiss. Weapons, gleaming under the artificial light. Blades honed to impossible sharpness. Firearms that hummed with latent power. Armor reinforced, modified, lethal. The past was not dead. It had only been waiting. She reached inside. The Lorthan officers monitoring human territories didn't notice at first. When the patrol team failed to check in, it was dismissed as a minor delay. When their ship's tracker went offline, It was chalked up to a routine maintenance error. Then the outpost at Aaron 6 went dark. Then the listening station at Wex Prime received a brief, garbled distress call, static, shouting, then silence. Then a Lorthan battleship's security systems detected an unauthorized breach. By the time the alarm was raised, it was already too late. The ship's crew scrambled, weapons primed, as the main bridge doors exploded inward. Rachel Rose walked through the smoke. Her boots echoed against the steel. Her armor, matte black with crimson highlights, absorbed the dim emergency lighting. In one hand, a plasma rifle, its barrel still glowing. In the other, a serrated blade, wet and dripping. A Lorthan officer, a veteran, a warfighter, raised his weapon, but she was already moving. She was faster than they expected. She was deadlier than they could comprehend. The first shot went wide. The second never had a chance. The officer collapsed, his throat carved open. The remaining crew hesitated. A mistake. Rachel moved like a phantom, a ghost of death, flowing from one target to the next. A gunshot, a broken limb, a knife to the heart. In less than a minute, the bridge was silent. She stepped over the bodies, accessing the ship's command console with practiced ease. A message needed to be sent. A lesson needed to be taught. She patched into the Lorthan command network, overriding security protocols with ease. A single transmission broadcast across all military channels. The screen flickered to life. Rachel Rose stood in the carnage of the bridge. The bodies of Lorthan officers sprawled around her. Her voice was calm. "You took my children." Her fingers danced across the console, activating the ship's self-destruct sequence. A countdown began. "I'm taking everything." She turned, walking away as the screen cut to static. Moments later, the battleship erupted into fire. On the Lorthan homeworld, Supreme Commander Vorgoth watched the footage, his mandibles clicking in disbelief. A human. One human. His mind reeled. How? Who? Then one of his officers, nervous, barely holding himself together, whispered a name. The blood drained from Vorgoth's face. "No," he murmured. "That's impossible." The officer swallowed. "Sir, it's her. A legend. A nightmare spoken of in hushed tones among the warlords and the mercenaries. A ghost from the darkest corners of the galaxy. Baba Yaga." Vorgoth's breath came slow and uneven. He had thought it was just a story. He had been wrong. And now it was too late. The security systems barely had time to register the breach before the perimeter defenses fell silent, their automated turrets reduced to smoldering scrap. Inside the command center, Lieutenant Growl struggled to keep his composure. His mandibles twitched as he barked orders into the comms, demanding a status update, demanding control. No response. The screens flickered. One by one, feeds from patrols cut to static. A shadow moved in the smoke. Growl's eyes narrowed. His claws tightened around his plasma rifle. He heard the rumors. Whispers among the high command of a human ghost, a predator who walked through fire and left only death behind. Soldiers dismissed it as superstition. He had dismissed it as superstition. Then he saw her. She was smaller than he expected, no towering beast, no hulking warrior. Just a woman in black armor, her face hidden behind a sleek, expressionless helmet. She moved like liquid darkness, weaving through the remains of the outpost with an unnatural ease. Growl raised his rifle, his finger tensed on the trigger. She shot first. A burning line of plasma cut across the room, striking him in the shoulder before he could react. The force sent him spinning, his weapon clattering against the floor. Pain flooded his nerves, but training forced him to push past it. He scrambled for cover, breath heaving. Silence. He held still, listening. His 3 remaining soldiers took positions around the wreckage, scanning every shadow. He couldn't see her, but he knew she was still there. A beep in his helmet alerted him to an incoming transmission. The main security feed had restored for a brief moment. He risked a glance at the screen. It showed the outpost's entrance. Bodies lay scattered across the floor, limbs twisted at unnatural angles. Some had been shot. Others had been killed with blades. Efficient, precise, ruthless. She was toying with them, a flicker of movement on the screen. He zoomed in. She was standing directly in front of the surveillance drone, looking up at the camera. She tilted her head, just slightly. Then she raised a single hand and waved. The screen went black. Growl's blood ran cold. A scream cut through the comms. One of his soldiers. He twisted around, his heart pounding. Where had she gone? Another scream. A rifle clattered to the ground. Then silence. He swallowed hard, forcing his mandibles to stop clicking. He wasn't some fresh recruit. He was a veteran, trained in a dozen battlefields, hardened by war. He wouldn't fall for this. A whisper of movement. He spun, firing wildly. Nothing. Then cold steel pressed against his throat. Her voice was a whisper, barely audible through the helmet's modulation. You have 5 seconds to tell me where the next patrol is stationed. Growl barely managed to keep his voice steady. You won't get away with this. She applied pressure, just enough for the blade to break the skin. 4. He gritted his teeth. His hand clenched against the wound in his shoulder. 3. His pride was screaming at him to hold his tongue, but he had seen what she could do. 2. He felt his pulse hammer against the knife's edge. Station Omega, he gasped. Outer rim. Next patrol moves in 6 cycles. She withdrew the blade, stepping back like a phantom. His knees buckled, but he forced himself to stay upright. He turned to face her fully, his breath ragged. She regarded him for a moment, then lifted her pistol. No, he rasped. The shot was clean. She was gone before his body hit the ground. The transmission arrived at Supreme Commander Vorgutha's command ship less than an hour later. His clawed hand clenched the edge of his command chair as he watched the footage. His officers stood in tense silence, afraid to so much as shift their weight. Rachel Rose was methodical. The way she moved, the way she eliminated targets with eerie precision. This wasn't just revenge. This was extermination. A subordinate spoke, his voice tentative. Sir, what are your orders? Vorguth exhaled slowly. His eyes lingered on the screen, on the still frame of her final moment in the outpost, standing over the fallen officer with the calm of a predator that had only just begun the hunt. This is not a common insurgent, he muttered. She is something else. The room remained silent. No one dared to state the obvious. They all knew what she was. Baba Yaga. The name alone was a curse. A relic of old wars, of whispered terror among criminals and warlords alike. A specter they had all hoped was nothing more than myth. But myths didn't leave bodies in their wake. Vorguth straightened, shoving down the unease curling in his gut. He was supreme commander of the Dominion. He would not be undone by a single human, no matter who she was. He gestured to his communications officer. Deploy the Omega Hunters. A murmur of unease rippled through the officers. One finally spoke. Sir, the Omega Hunters have never failed a mission. If they engage, there will be no prisoners. Vorgutha's mandibles twitched into something that might have been a smirk. That is precisely the point. The Omega Hunters were not like standard Dominion forces. They were not soldiers. They were not even warlords. They were something worse. Each was selected from the deadliest mercenaries and assassins in the known galaxy. Cybernetically enhanced, genetically perfected, utterly devoid of hesitation. They did not fight for honor or for the Dominion's glory. They fought because it was the only thing they knew. There were 5 of them. Each had their own method. One preferred sniper kills from miles away. Another liked to flay his victims alive, savoring their last screams. One had never once spoken, his voice long since lost to mechanical augmentation. They had no names, only designations. Their leader, Omega 1, received the transmission from Vorguth without expression. His features were smooth, his eyes black and empty. He analyzed the data, scanning through Rachel Rose's attacks, her movements, her kills. A single human, he remarked. Not a difficult hunt. Vorgutha's voice crackled through the comms. Do not underestimate her. Omega 1 had no concept to fear. He had faced the worst the galaxy had to offer. He had crushed rebellions, assassinated warlords, dismantled entire organizations without blinking. He glanced at his team. She will be dead in 48 hours. Rachel Rose was already waiting. She sat in the cockpit of her ship, Retribution, watching the cold stars beyond the viewport. The engines hummed softly, her systems locked onto the signal she had planted at the last outpost. The Dominion thought they were hunting her. She let the corner of her mouth curl. She was hunting them. Her fingers danced across the controls, activating the ship's defense grid. Her weapons were primed, her armor reinforced, her blade sharpened to a monomolecular edge. She had fought mercenaries before, assassins, war machines. She knew how they thought, knew how they hunted. The Omega Hunters would come swiftly, confident, arrogant. She would show them why that was a mistake. A soft alert blinked on her screen. Multiple inbound vessels. No distress signals. No official Dominion markings. They were here. She exhaled slowly, flexing her fingers. For the first time in years, she felt alive. With a flick of a switch, she powered down the ship's outer lights, letting the darkness consume her. Then she waited. The hunt had begun. The Omega Hunters came as expected, slipping through the void like ghosts, their ships cloaked in near-perfect invisibility. They were the finest killers the Dominion had ever bred, a force of nature that left nothing but corpses in their wake. Their leader, Omega-1, had anticipated a chase, a desperate flight from a human overwhelmed by superior skill. He had not anticipated the trap. The moment their ships entered range, a burst of electromagnetic interference rippled through space, scrambling their sensors. Before they could react, Retribution came to life. It didn't open fire from a distance like a cautious prey. It lunged, engines roaring as it carved through the void with a speed they hadn't predicted. Rachel was already moving, her fingers flying across the controls. The Omega Hunters were good, maybe even the best. But they were used to hunting the weak. They weren't used to being hunted. Her ship twisted through their formation, cannons spitting fire. One enemy vessel exploded outright, torn apart by precise plasma bursts. Another took a direct hit to its thrusters, spiraling out of control. Omega-1 didn't panic. He analyzed, adapted. His voice was cold over the comms. She fights like a machine. Predictable. Guide her into Sector 7. Deploy mines. The remaining ships shifted formation, herding her toward the coordinates. Rachel saw it, understood the play. She didn't care. She went straight in. The mines detonated in perfect sequence, filling the void with fire and shrapnel. A lesser pilot would have been incinerated. Rachel was already rolling the ship, adjusting thruster output, threading through the chaos like a wraith. Another enemy fighter got too close. A hard turn, a calculated maneuver, and its own mind shredded it into molten scrap. Inside Retribution, Rachel let herself grin. The Omega Hunters weren't bad, but they weren't good enough. Omega-1 adjusted again, his mind a cold engine calculating new probabilities. If direct engagement was unwise, then the answer was simple. Make her fight on the ground. A transmission cut through the battlefield. Omega-3 disable her ship. One remaining enemy fighter banked sharply, streaking in at full speed, weapons glowing hot. Rachel knew what was coming. EMP payload. She flicked a switch, diverting all available power to shields. The impact was instantaneous. The pulse slammed into her ship, frying secondary systems, overloading stabilizers. The stars spun wildly. Her ship screamed warnings. She fought for control, every muscle locked in determination. Omega-1 watched from a distance. He did not celebrate. His prey was still alive. He transmitted a final order. Prepare ground forces. The hunt was not over. It had only changed shape. The landing was brutal, metal shrieking as Retribution tore across the surface of a barren, windswept planet. Smoke curled from its hull, sparks cascading in the dark. Rachel gritted her teeth as she unstrapped, ignoring the protests of her bruised ribs. She didn't have time to waste. She grabbed her weapons, pistol, blade, rifle. A lifetime of muscle memory guided her. No hesitation, no doubt. She was already moving before the first enemy boots touched the ground. Omega, One and his surviving team deployed with mechanical precision. They advanced, helmet scanning, reading heat signatures, tracking her every movement. There was no fear. They had brought down empires. One human would not stop them. Rachel crouched behind the wreckage of her ship, watching them through her visor. They moved well, coordinated, efficient. But efficiency meant predictability. She'd spent years dealing with men like them, people who thought in straight lines, in logical patterns. She did not fight like that. She waited. Let them spread out. Let them commit. Then she struck. The first kill was silent. A quick cut to the throat, blood steaming in the cold night air. The second went down screaming, body riddled with plasma fire before he even turned. Omega. One registered the losses without emotion. He adjusted, directing his team into defensive formation. She's using guerrilla tactics. No more separation. We flush her out. Rachel was already ahead of them. She had mapped the battlefield in her mind, calculated angles, escape routes. She used the terrain like a weapon, drawing them deeper into their own mistakes. A sniper shot cracked through the air, missing her by an inch. She turned, returning fire before the shooter could adjust. The sniper crumpled, a blackened hole where his visor had been. Omega, one remained calm. Omega, two, engaged full suppression. The last remaining hunter fired an explosive charge, collapsing a section of rock in front of her, cutting off her escape. Good. They thought she needed an escape. She charged straight at them. The Omega hunter was fast. Rachel was faster. She hit him low, using his own weight against him, driving her blade between the seams of his armor. He gasped once, a wet, surprised sound, before she twisted the knife and let him fall. Only one left. Omega won. He did not speak. He only stared at her through the blankness of his visor. Then he attacked. They met in a blur of movement. Plasma fire screamed between them. Blades clashed in violent arcs of light. He was stronger. She was smarter. He was ruthless. She was relentless. He caught her arm, twisted, tried to force her down. She wrenched free, pivoted, drove her knee into his ribs. He staggered just for a second. That was all she needed. Her knife found the joint between his helmet and armor. She drove it deep. His body jerked. Then it stilled. She stepped back, breathing hard. The Omega hunters were gone. She looked up at the night sky, knowing there were eyes watching from above. The Dominion had seen everything. They knew she would not stop. She would never stop. On the Dominion homeworld, Supreme Commander Vorgoth watched in silence as the last of the Omega hunters' life signs faded from the screen. His officers stood rigid, awaiting his reaction. He said nothing. One of them cleared his throat. "Sir, should we deploy more forces?" Vorgoth turned, his gaze slow and deliberate. "More forces." The officer hesitated. Vorgoth's mandibles clicked together. His voice was quiet, but there was a deep, underlying tremor of fury. She destroyed a strike team that has never failed. She obliterated an entire outpost. She is a single human. He exhaled, stepping toward the main display. The image of Rachel Rose loomed over the command deck, standing in the wreckage of her latest kill. She is no longer just a target. He turned to his war council, his voice carrying through the chamber like a death knell. She is a war. The Dominion launched its response within the hour. Every available fleet, every enforcer, every warship was mobilized. Rachel had started this alone. She would not remain alone for long. The galaxy had been watching. They had seen the Dominion bleed. They had seen what one human had done. And now others were listening. Messages flooded the hidden channels. Old friends, past allies, forgotten names. Some owed her debts. Some simply wanted to see the Dominion burn. Resistance cells reignited across a dozen systems. Smugglers whispered her name in hushed tones. Bounty hunters debated if they were stupid enough to try for her head. She was no longer just a mother seeking vengeance. She was a symbol, and symbols were powerful. In the dark corridors of the Dominion's core worlds, rebels took up arms. In distant starports, pirates cheered her name. In the highest levels of power, the Lorthan elite began to whisper among themselves, uneasy for the first time in centuries. This was no longer a hunt. This was war. The Lorthan Dominion had never known fear, not truly. It had crushed rebellions, wiped out entire species, and imposed its will on the stars for generations. But now its fleets burned in the void, its soldiers whispered in dread, and its commanders sat frozen before flickering screens, watching in horror as a single human tore through their ranks like a force of nature. Rachel Rose had become something more than a woman. She was legend, myth, terror incarnate. She had started with vengeance, but vengeance alone could not explain the wildfire spreading through the Dominion. The galaxy had seen her wrath and decided it wanted a piece of it. Resistance movements erupted across occupied worlds. Pirate fleets turned their weapons toward Lorthan warships, and mercenaries who once took Dominion credits now took their heads instead. And in the heart of all, Rachel stood at the helm of retribution, her gaze locked on the looming monstrosity of steel and fire that was Vorgotha's command station, Citadel Prime. The fortress world was the last true bastion of Dominion control, a city encased in impenetrable defenses, wrapped in layers of plasma shields and fortified gun batteries. 100 fleets had tried to breach its walls over the centuries. None had succeeded. She was going to walk through the front door. The resistance fleet had gathered, a ragtag armada of scavenged warships, repurposed freighters, and stolen Dominion dreadnoughts. They were outgunned, outmatched, outnumbered. But they had her. She keyed the open channel, her voice calm, clear. "We take the head off the snake, or we burn trying." The response was a roar across the comms, captains and pilots and gunners steeling themselves for what was to come. The first shot came from the Dominion, a blazing column of plasma ripping through the void. It struck a resistance cruiser dead center, tearing through its hull like paper. Rachel didn't flinch. She pushed the retribution forward, weaving through the chaos as war erupted around her. The sky burned. Ships collided, weapons roared, and the void filled with the wreckage of the dying. Resistance fighters tore through Dominion lines with a ferocity their enemy had never expected. They had something to fight for. Rachel had made sure of that. She cut through the battle with ruthless efficiency, her ship diving between debris and laser fire, dodging missile locks with impossible precision. She could feel it, the pulse of inevitability drawing her closer to the surface, to the heart of the Dominion's power. Citadel Prime's defenses activated in full force. Orbital cannons rotated, locking onto incoming threats. Fighters screamed through the air, swarming like locusts. It wasn't enough. Rachel launched forward, the Retribution's main cannons carving a path through the blockade. Explosions dotted the sky, metal and bodies alike cast into the cold abyss. She tore past the last defense perimeter, diving through the atmosphere at breakneck speed. The hull groaned from the heat, alarms blared, but she didn't stop. Couldn't stop. The Citadel loomed below, a sprawling fortress of black metal and towering spires. Anti-air fire filled the sky, seeking her out like a swarm of angry wasps. She piloted straight into the storm. The ship shuddered as rounds clipped the hull, heat warnings flashing red across the console. She ignored them. The surface was close. So close. A final burst of acceleration. She hit the eject sequence. The Retribution continued forward, locked in a suicide dive toward the heart of the Citadel. Rachel launched free, wind and fire screaming past her as she descended, her body twisting through the chaos. The ship hit. The explosion consumed the main structure in a column of white-hot fury, shock waves ripping through the city. Buildings crumbled, gun emplacements detonated, and soldiers were thrown like ragdolls. Rachel landed in the wreckage, her boots crunching against shattered steel. She rose, flames reflecting off her armor, weapons already in hand. The Dominion's elite guard was waiting. They charged, rifles raised, barking orders in their guttural tongue. She moved before they could pull the trigger, a blur of motion and death. Her blade carved through the first, her pistol barked twice, dropping the next two before they could react. A plasma bolt grazed her shoulder, burning hot. She turned with a snarl, firing a shot straight through the attacker's visor. He dropped without a sound. The survivors hesitated. She smiled. They ran. She pushed forward. The halls of the Citadel were bathed in flickering red light, alarms wailing, automated defenses coming online. She didn't stop moving. Her weapon sang, her body a dance of violence and purpose. Every step she took left another body behind. And then, at last, she reached the throne room. The doors groaned open, revealing the Supreme Commander himself. Vorgoth stood at the far end of the chamber, his armor gleaming under the dim lights. He was larger than she expected, towering, a brute of a creature with deep scars lining his carapace. His mandibles clicked in something resembling amusement. "So," he said, voice deep measured, "this is the great Baba Yaga." Rachel stepped forward, gun still smoking in her grip. "You killed my children." Vorgoth inclined his head. "Yes." She moved. He was ready. The first strike came fast, a blur of claws and reinforced metal. She dodged barely, his strength sending shock waves through the floor where she had been a second before. She retaliated, a shot aimed at his head, but he deflected it with a gauntlet hand. They clashed, predator against predator. He was stronger. She was faster. He struck again, his armored fist catching her across the ribs. Pain exploded through her, but she rolled with it, twisting under his follow-up strike. Her blade lashed out, carving deep into his side. He roared, backhanding her with enough force to send her skidding across the room. She coughed, blood on her lips. He loomed over her. "You think vengeance will change anything?" he asked, voice calm despite the wound leaking dark ichor from his side. She spat blood. "No." She reached into her belt. A detonator. His eyes widened. She pressed it. The walls trembled as the explosives she had planted on the way ignited in sequence. The throne room cracked, fractures running through the very foundation of the Citadel. Vorgoth staggered. He turned, taking in the destruction, the flames consuming everything. Rachel pushed herself up, steadying her breath. "You're done," she said simply. He turned back to her. For the first time, she saw it. Fear. She lunged. Her blade found his throat. He gasped, choking, clawing at the wound. But she was already stepping back, watching as the Supreme Commander of the Dominion collapsed to his knees. He tried to speak. She didn't let him. One final shot to the head. It was over. The Citadel groaned, the explosions tearing through its core. The structure was falling apart, collapsing under its own weight. Rachel walked through the destruction. Outside, the resistance forces were overwhelming the last Dominion strongholds. Their leader was dead. Their empire was crumbling. She reached the edge of the platform, the wind howling around her. She looked up at the sky. The battle was won. Her children were avenged. She let the weight settle, let the moment sink in. Then, without a word, she vanished into the chaos. The legend of Baba Yaga would live on, and the galaxy would never forget.